What do you do with the negative emotions? You didn't mention envy. There's some really dark ones that can really pull you into some bad places. Envy, fear.
Yeah, envy is a really bad one. Pride and envy are among the worst. Those are the sins of Cain, by the way, in the story of Cain and Abel. Because Cain fails because his sacrifices are insufficient. He doesn't offer his best. And so he's rejected. And that makes him bitter and unhappy. And he goes to complain to God. And God says to him two things. He said, if God tells him, if your sacrifices were appropriate, you'd be accepted. It's a brutal thing. It's a brutal rejoinder. And he also says, you can't blame your misery on your failure. You could learn from your failure. When you failed, you invited in the spirit of envy and resentment and you allowed it to possess you. And that's why you're miserable. And so Cain is embittered by that response, and that's when he kills Abel. And so you might say, well, how do you fortify yourself against that pathway of resentment? And part of classic religious practice is aimed to do that precisely. What's the antithesis of envy? Gratitude. That's something you can practice, right? And I mean, literally practice.
I think envy is one of the biggest enemies for a young person because basically you're starting from nowhere. Life is hard. You've achieved nothing. And you're striving and you're failing constantly because...
And you see other people whom you think aren't having the same problem.
Yeah, and they succeed. And they could be your neighbor, they could be succeeding by a little bit, or somebody on the internet succeeding by a lot. And I think that can really pull a person down. That kind of envy can really destroy a person.
Yeah, definitely. Well, the gratitude element would be something like, well, yeah, you don't know anything, and you're at the bottom, but you're not 80. Mm-hmm. You know, one of the best predictors of wealth in the United States is age. So then you might say, well, who's got it better? The old rich guy or the young poor guy? And I would say most old rich guys would trade their wealth for youth. So it's not exactly clear at all at any stage who's got the upper hand, who's got the advantage. And, you know, you could say, well, I've got all these burdens in front of me because I'm young and oh my God. Or you could say, every dragon has its treasure. And that's actually a pattern of perception. You know, I'm not saying that people don't have their challenges. They certainly do. But discriminating between a challenge and an opportunity is very, very difficult. And learning to see a challenge as an opportunity, that's the beginning of wisdom.
It's interesting. I don't know how it works. Maybe you can elucidate. But when you have envy towards somebody, if you just celebrate them, so gratitude, but actually, as opposed to sort of ignoring and being grateful for the things you have, like literally celebrate that person, it transforms, it lights the way. I don't know why that is exactly.
The only reason you're envious is because you see someone who has something that you want. Okay, so let's think about it. Well, first of all, the fact that they have it means that in principle, you could get it. At least someone has. So that's a pretty good deal. And then you might say, well, the fact that I'm envious of that person means that I actually want something. And then you might think, well, what am I envious of? I'm envious of their attractiveness to women. It's like, okay, well, now you know something about yourself. You know that one true motivation that's making itself manifest to you is that you wish that you would be the sort of person who is attractive to women. Now, of course, that's an extremely common longing among men, period, but particularly among young men. It's like, well, what makes you so sure you couldn't have that? Well, how about, here's an answer. You don't have enough faith in yourself. And maybe you don't have enough faith in, well, I would say the divine. You don't believe that the world is characterized by enough potentiality so that even miserable you has a crack at the brass ring. And like I talked about this actually practically in one of my previous books because I wrote a chapter called Compare Yourself to Who You Are and Not to Someone Else at the Present Time. Well, why? Well, your best benchmark for tomorrow is you today. And you might not be able to have what someone else has on the particular axis you're comparing yourself with them on, but you could make an incremental improvement over your current state regardless of the direction that you're aiming. And it is the case, and this is a law, the return on incremental improvement is exponential or geometric and not linear. So even if you start, this is why the hero is always born in a lowly place, mythologically, right? Christ, who redeems the world, is born in a manger with the animals to poverty-stricken parents in the middle of a God-forsaken desert in a nondescript time and place, isolated. Well, why? Well, because everyone young struggles with their insufficiency. But that doesn't mean that great things can't make themselves manifest. And part of the insistence in the biblical text, for example, is that it's incumbent on you to have the courage, to have faith in yourself and in the spirit of reality, the essence of reality, regardless of how you construe the evidence at hand. Right. Look at me. I'm so useless. I don't know anything. I don't have anything. It's hopeless. I don't have it within me. The world couldn't offer me that possibility. Well, what the hell do you know about that? This is what Job figures out in the midst of his suffering in the book of Job, because Job is tortured terribly by God, who makes a bet with Satan himself to bring him down. And Job's decision in the face of his intense suffering is, I'm not going to lose faith in my essential goodness, and I'm not going to lose faith in the essential goodness of being itself, regardless of how terrible the face it's showing to me at the moment happens to be. And I think, okay, what do you make of that claim? Well, let's look at it practically. You're being tortured by the arbitrariness of life. That's horrible. Now you lose faith in yourself, and you become cynical about being. So, are you infinitely worse off instantly? And then you might say, well, yeah, but it's really asking a lot of people that they maintain faith even in their darkest hours. It's like, yeah, that might be asking everything from people. But then you also might ask, this is a very strange question, is if you were brought into being by something that was essentially good, wouldn't that thing that brought you into being demand that you make the best in yourself manifest? And wouldn't it be precisely when you most need that you'd be desperate enough to risk what it would take to let it emerge?
So you kind of make it seem that reason could be the thing that takes you out of a place of darkness, sort of finding that calling through reason. I think it's also possible when reason fails you to just take the leap. Navigate not by reason, but by finding the thing that scares you, the risk, to take the risk, take the leap, and then figure it out while you're in the air.
Yeah, well, I think that's always part of a heroic adventure, is that ability to cut the Gordian knot. But you could also ask from an engineering perspective, okay, what are the axioms that make a decision like that possible? And the answer would be something like, I'm going to make the presumption that if I move forward in good faith, whatever happens to me will be the best thing that could possibly happen, no matter what it is. And I think that's actually how you make an alliance with truth. And I also think that truth is an adventure. And the way you make an alliance with truth is by assuming that whatever happens to you, if you're living in truth, is the best thing that could happen, even if you can't see that at any given moment. Because otherwise you'd say that truth would be just the handmaiden of advantage. Well, I'm going to say something truthful, and I pay a price. Well, that means I shouldn't have said it. Well, that possibly, but that's not the only possible standard of evaluation. Because what you're doing is you're making the outcome your deity, right? Well, I just reverse that and say, no, truth is the deity. The outcome is variable, but that doesn't eradicate the initial axiom. Where's the constant, right? What's the constant?